Hey Internet! Now let me start off by saying, because you probably saw the title and already got concerned, that this is not about all multiplayer. I do not hate every form of multiplayer in video games. Growing up, I used to play co-op in games like Kung Fu Heroes and Ikaria Warriors on the NES with my little sister. And into college, I had a friend who she could consistently kick my butt in every fighting game that exists, and I still had a good time playing. Sometimes multiplayer is great, sometimes it's needed, sometimes it's part of the game. So I'm not going the route of a certain angry online game reviewer that hates all forms of multiplayer. I want to talk about a specific thing. There are some games that will take the multiplayer aspects and then encroach on the single player experience with those, and that's just a special kind of garbage, and that's what I want to talk about. And the most recent example would be Elden Ring. Now right off the bat, I don't even know why I necessarily bought this game or what I was expecting from it. I am terrible at Soulsborne games. I have no business playing them because I am very much a casual. I enjoy slower paced, more relaxed, less difficulty kind of single-player games. Lots of RPGs and stuff like that, Metroidvanias, basic 2D platformers, that kind of deal. I play games just for a fun, casual experience. I'm not looking to be uber competitive. I don't need to be the best there ever was. I'm not Ash Ketchum. So I don't know why I decided to pick this up and play it, but I did. And while I was flattened by the very first boss, so even Shelby from Girlfriend Reviews is better at this game than I am.
Yes, bitch!
I still managed to experience a whole bunch of multiplayer creep in the single-player campaign. And I found the first instance right when I very first started the game up. After you've created your character and they're born into this little world thing, one of the first things I noticed, because it really stands out, it's visually unique from everything else around you, was a small white glowing glyph on the floor. And I walked over and there was a button to activate it, and I did. And it was a message from some random player. And as I continued on throughout the tutorial area, I found a million more of these things. Now some of them were absolutely benign, saying, hey, welcome to the game, play the game, you're going to die a lot. That's fine. And then there were some that were just needlessly rude or insulting or belittling, which, it's online gaming, that's to be expected. And just, there were so many of these. And now you might be thinking to yourself, well, it's not a big deal, it doesn't really encroach on gameplay, just ignore them, don't click on them. And yes, that is an option. However, A, you shouldn't have to do that. I shouldn't have to ignore part of the game that's presented to me. They should only just present relevant things. You know, if you're trying to experience something, if you're paying to play and experience a game, you shouldn't have to ignore parts of it. If they're not helpful to the game, if they're not part of the game, they just shouldn't be there. But the second thing is that even if I decided to, okay, I'm going to ignore these, I'm going to walk past them. I mean, they're giant glowing white things on the floor. They're very prevalent. You notice every one, even if you ignore it, but you can't ignore them, except for when you can't. Because sometimes you're trying to interact with something else, an item that you want to pick up, or something you need to investigate, or whatever the case is, and the button to interact with that item is the same as the button to interact with the glyph on the floor. So like, for example, someone placed one directly under a door exiting the initial area where your character first spawns. It's very easy to interact with his stupid rune instead of the door because they use the same button and you need to stand in the same position to interact with either one. So that's the kind of thing that just, it doesn't need to be there. There was no reason to include that. Even if, let's assume that all the trolls are somehow filtered out, that someone takes every offensive, racist, sexist, political garbage comment that someone left behind and got rid of all of them. First of all, that's magic, because you can't do that. But second of all, even if you did, let's say all that's left are things that are meant to be helpful. There is such a thing as too helpful. Some of these, for example, might warn you of a trap that you didn't yet know existed. And while that might be great to help you avoid it, it's also taking away some of the difficulty and the challenge of the game. And granted, like I said, games like this aren't really my speed. I don't necessarily want that challenge or difficulty. The people that generally play them do. So if all of a sudden people are spoiling all of these traps or pitfalls or surprises, it's really going to ruin the experience for you, or at least take away from it. And alternatively, they might give you the answer to a puzzle you haven't solved yet, or show you a secret that you haven't even had the chance to find. So it's not even that you were stuck, it's that you were told about something before you could experience it yourself. Basically like spoilers in a movie. And I don't see how they add to the game in any way whatsoever, but I see a lot of scenarios where they take away from it. And that's the kind of thing that you should be avoiding when you're making a game like this. Don't shoehorn in multiplayer elements just to say, hey, look how interactive this is. Look how online enabled our game is. By the way, you need to be online to play it. Don't do that nonsense because it doesn't improve your game in any way. It's just shoehorned in for no reason, and a lot of times ends up being a detriment to your game. But this isn't the only example I have. I'm not just picking on Elden Ring. They're not the only game to do this. It's just one of the most recent examples I can think of. But another example, and a game that I actually enjoy much more and am far better at, would be No Man's Sky. Now this does the same thing as Elden Ring, where it has messages you can see that are left behind from other players. An issue is, in here, you don't even have to push a button to interact with them, you just have to be near them and they pop up. This is especially awful because the game also likes to do FOMO-based, limited-time research quest type things where you have to start a new save, go to specific points, complete specific quests, and then you get in-game rewards like an exclusive ship or a pet or some just different, completely cosmetic options. I won't get sidetracked on FOMO right now, but basically, because you're all in one shared online game, in one singular universe, as you're going to these save locations and doing these quests for this time-based thing, all the other players are doing those same things. And a lot of the players that got there before you will leave messages. And some of them will be awful. People will say, you know, I don't want to get overly political, but they'll be, let's say, for an evil dictator who's currently in the middle of trying to take over a country that's not his own. Or they might say racist or sexist things. They might use foul language, but editing just enough of the letters so that it doesn't get filtered out. Just horrible messages. And of course, you could report these and they'll eventually go away, but the problem is you've already seen them, they've already annoyed you, it may have already ruined your experience for playing at that moment. So the damage is already done before you can report it. And again, you don't need to include that. Don't give people that option because there's no benefit to having it. But this game also goes a step further, and again, because the entire game takes place in one big shared universe, you see everything that other people do. You don't necessarily interact with them directly, or at least not as much if you turn the multiplayer off, like I exclusively do, because I have no interest in other humans. But you will still see the things they created. So any bases or structures that they've made still exist in your game, even if you're playing multi or single player on your own by yourself. And there are some people who use this to be griefers in the game, and basically will construct a box around a crashed ship, or a quest giver, or a portal, or just some other important thing that you wouldn't want to miss. And again, you have the option to report this. You can go into the menu, report the base, it will disappear from the game for you so you can interact with everything normally. The problem is, not every player necessarily knows that. And again, just the initial frustration of finding that and seeing that someone is impeding your gameplay is sometimes enough just to set you off from it. You know, even if reporting it only takes a few seconds and a few button presses, sometimes just the fact that it existed in the first place and that the game decided to give people the option to be that crappy to each other just makes you want to stop playing, at least in that moment. And these are the kind of things, like I said, just there's no reason to add this into the game. Now, I know No Man's Sky, a lot of people were clamoring for the online multiplayer aspects in this game. So I'm sure there are people on the subreddit or the Twitter or whatever that are already sharpening their pitchforks, lighting their torches, and getting ready to scalp me for saying that any aspect of multiplayer is bad. But it is. You know, if you're in multiplayer mode and you want to play with other people and interact with their characters, you can shoot each other, loot each other, you can, you know, go to each other's bases, do whatever you want. That's great. But if I specifically started a single-player save, because you do get to choose with your saves if they're single-player or multiplayer, and I have all the multiplayer options turned off in my settings, it should basically be my own instance of the universe. I should not be seeing other players, I should not be hearing from them, none of that should exist for me. I just want to play the game for myself. But I have an even more egregious example of multiplayer encroaching on the single-player experience, and that would be Forza Horizon 5. Now, there are probably other games that do a lot of the same things that this one does, so again, I'm not trying to target this game specifically. This is just the example I have currently because it's a game that I own, enjoy playing, and have experience with. Now, one of the first complaints is that they have a lot of the achievements you can only unlock through multiplayer. Again, this is not exclusive or new. This has been done, unfortunately, pretty much forever in games, and it's awful. But it's something we've all come to expect. You know, if you're playing an Overwatch or a Call of Duty or something that's very multiplayer focused, you kind of expect the achievements to require online play. You know, in those instances, you have to get good to get 100% of the game. But for a game like this, which is like an arcade racer, you really would expect the majority of it, if not the entirety of it, to be focused around the single-player experience. You know, you're driving off-road with unrealistic car physics, doing races against parade floats, monster trucks, and steam engines. It's not exactly something that you should have to become a master-level player of, or go online for hours each day just to get all the achievements and experience all the content. And by that, I do mean that they actually have locked some of the content behind multiplayer. I don't just mean certain experiences, like certain race types are only online, although that is the case. But I mean, there are 21 cars in this game that you can only get through multiplayer interaction. The majority of them are part of limited time events where you have to earn X amount of points doing certain in-game objectives, and then at the end of the event, if you have whatever amount of points for each little gated tier, you unlock car rewards to go with those. So they're doing the FOMO thing, same as No Man's Sky, and again, I won't get too much into that, but I hate it. But also, they're forcing you to do multiplayer. So, like I said, someone like myself who is very much a casual, I am not great at this game. I don't do races at the S1 or S2 tier of cars because I just can't control them, it's too fast, I'm not great at it. You know, I keep the AI difficulty at normal because anything higher than that is just too much for me to handle, I'm going to lose more often than not, and it's not fun for me. I understand that because of that, there's probably a few things I'll miss out on. You know, if there's an achievement for beating every story mode race on, you know, expert level or with the highest difficulty AI, I won't get that achievement, I understand. If there's one or two very top tier cars that I don't get to unlock because I didn't reach a certain skill level, that's understandable. But if there's several dozen cars that I don't get just because I don't like to play online with other people, that's kind of crap. When you pay full price for a game, you should really get the whole game and everything that it contains. You know, you should not be limited by your willingness to interact with other people, or in some instances, your ability to interact with other people. Because again, not everyone in the world has the internet, and even the people that do might not have an Xbox Live subscription to allow for competitive multiplayer. So it's basically punishing people for not being good enough or not going online enough. And again, these events are time limited. So not only do you have to go online and play with other people, you have to do it pretty much daily if you want to accrue enough points by getting all the daily challenges completed and unlocking the cars. So it's very badly stringing the multiplayer into the single player in a way that you don't get the full experience of one without forcing yourself to experience the other part of it. But I'll stop ranting there. I don't want to harp on this too much, and I don't want to get off into the tangent on FOMO, because my opinions on that would turn this into a very long rant. And I also want to once again say, I don't necessarily hate these games. Elden Ring might not be for me, because I'm just not good at Soulsborne games, but it's really pretty. I think the idea of it was really good, and from what I understand, it's a much more accessible Soulsborne if you're adept enough to actually get past the first boss, I guess it's much easier than something like a Dark Souls, because there's just other mechanics to make it less of a challenge. And the other two games I do thoroughly enjoy playing. It's just, overall, I don't like the direction that games seem to be going, where more and more titles are trying to, if not focus on multiplayer, at least integrate it in some way. Whether they're trying to force you to be online to play your game, even in single-player mode, or whether they are tying content or certain experiences behind multiplayer play. It just feels like they're trying to punish the people that just use video games as escapism. You know, if you just want to have a fun, relaxing, casual experience of playing a video game, it's getting harder and harder to do that. And I don't love that. You know, I don't think every AAA title needs to turn into EA's Sim City and the atrocity that that was. I think enough companies need to they need to embrace the concept that people just want to play a game. Not everything needs to be the next Smash Brothers that you're going to play at tournaments for the next decade. You know, it doesn't need to be Call of Duty. We already have Call of Duty. It's already filling that gap. Not every game in the world needs to work in a battle arena type thing, which even Forza Horizon did, because not every game is supposed to be that. We already have Fortnite or PUBG or whatever game that's filling that gap. You don't need to create more of that thing. Someone's already doing it. Just make your own game. But that's the end of my little rant. Those are my thoughts. If you have thoughts too, then, I don't know, tell me in the comments. Or keep them to yourself. Both are equally valid options, because, again, you don't always have to interact with other humans. Sometimes you can just consume the thing, and then that's the end of the experience. And speaking of, that's the end of this experience.